The heartbreaking tale of the Great Gatsby estate. A dream home designed to last for eternity. A location where the nights felt brighter and more golden than the days. Champagne poured like endless rivers here. The orchestra played with such volume that the ocean itself seemed to go quiet. Yet, underneath the shimmer, there was debt, fear, and silence. The property that sparked the Great Gatsby myth wasn't merely a venue for parties, it was a snare. Notoriety was purchased, identities were wiped away, and contracts were inked in secret. The proprietor trusted that stone walls could protect his standing, but what happens when the stone only obscures the fractures? When the lights were extinguished, the friends disappeared. When the melody stopped, the invoices stayed. Then, one day, this palace simply vanished from the map as though it had never been there. Why? Who paid the actual cost for this legend? With their money, their family, and their future. This isn't a fairy tale about riches. It is a narrative of how a dream turns into a heavy load, and how brilliance becomes a disguise. So tell me, if the mansion that birthed the Gatsby legend couldn't survive, can the legend itself? If you enjoy deep dives into Gilded Age architecture and the lineages that constructed them, please like Skou's investigation. Wait, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which estate to investigate next. Your backing makes these in-depth stories possible. Part 1. Gold Coast Morning. Your support makes these detailed stories possible. Now, let's walk onto that shore. May 1899. The north shore of Long Island stretches about 20 miles east from Flushing Bay. It is a coastline of farmlands, fishing hamlets, and quiet coves. No palaces exist yet, no iron gates. Just the salt breeze and the occasional country home set back from the sound. However, money is on the move. Families with names that remain unknown to the society columns are purchasing land by the acre. They arrive via private rail cars, inspect the waterfront, sign documents, and depart. This isn't Newport, not just yet. It is a blank canvas where new fortunes intend to write their history in stone. At Roslyn, where the harbor gets narrow and trees scale the steep bluffs, one parcel is distinct, elevated and sheltered. It is a natural amphitheater facing north toward Connecticut and west toward the city's distant smog. 216 acres, access to deep water, a forest dense enough to conceal a mansion, yet open enough to frame the scenery. The price is high. The buyer doesn't pause. His name is Clarence Mackay, 25 years old. He is the heir to the Comstock silver fortune and the commercial cable company, an empire of underwater telegraph cables connecting continents. He isn't constructing a summer cottage. He is declaring his arrival. Beside him stands Katherine Mackay, 22. The daughter of a United States Army general and a Livingston by blood. Old New York flows in her veins. His wealth is Western, recent, and raw. Hers is colonial, quiet, and assured. Together, they represent the marriage that will define this coastline. New capital fused with old pedigree. They call it progress. History will name it the Gilded Age. They commissioned Stanford White, not just his firm, but the man himself. Stanford White of McKim, Mead & White, the designer of the Washington Square Arch, Madison Square Garden, the Century and Metropolitan Clubs, an architect whose name alone implies scale, permanence, and a beauty that photographs never completely capture. He is 55. His reputation is untouchable. His fees reflect that fact. Mackay doesn't blink. The program is precise. Not just a house, a domain. a grand hall for 200 guests, a music room calibrated for soloists, a dining room that seats 40 without feeling crowded, a library for serious collections, guest wings ready to house weekend parties of 20 or more, terraces looking out over the water, gardens cascading down to a private harbor, staff quarters that are hidden yet efficient. Every room is sized to express not just comfort, but consequence. White listens, sketches, and refines. He returns with elevations that make Katherine gasp and Clarence give a sharp nod. The budget is $2 million, roughly $70 million in today's currency. The timeline is 3 years. The peak workforce is 200 men. Materials include Indiana limestone, Italian marble, domestic copper, Belgian glass, and Oregon timber. Nothing runs of the mill. Nothing sourced from just down the street. It is May of 1899. McKinley is in the White House. The war with Spain has just concluded. America holds new territories: Cuba, the Philippines, Puerto Rico. Empire abroad, mansions at home. The symmetry is not an accident. The Mackays stand on raw earth, the wind lifting her veil, his hand shielding his eyes against the glare off the sound. In that instant, they believe that stone can secure happiness, that scale equates to safety, that a house, if built grand enough and well enough, will keep out time, judgment, and doubt. White believes it too. He has constructed monuments before. This one will be unique, lighter in spirit, less of a marble palazzo, more American ease. He names it Harbor Hill. The name sounds gentle, pastoral, almost modest. It will be none of those things. Groundbreaking happens in July. Part 2. Workshop Under Sky. The initial crews show up by barge and wagon. Surveyors with transits, engineers holding stakes, foremen with checklists already 2 pages deep. They find a forest, not a field. Oaks a century old, maples as thick as pillars, undergrowth dense enough to lose a man in. White's plan requires clearing 40 acres without ruining the natural amphitheater that sold Mackay on the location. Selective cutting, strategic thinning. The trees that stay must frame the views, not obstruct them. This is surgery, not logging. By August, excavation starts. Foundation depth is 12 feet at the deepest point, cutting into the bedrock where the mansion's core will anchor. The pit spans 160 feet across the front facade and runs 90 feet along the main axis. Crews rotate in shifts. Steam shovels claw at the earth. Teams of horses drag the spoil down temporary roads to elevate the low ground near the shore. The noise travels across the harbor. Fishermen lodge complaints. Mackay's lawyers respond with plats, deeds, and silence. September brings the stone. Indiana limestone arrives by rail. 60 tons in the initial shipment, 300 by the year's end. Each block is numbered to align with White's blueprints. Masons set up field shops, cutting sheds, mortar beds, and a temporary forge for ironwork. The workforce expands. At its peak, 200 men are on site, though the count fluctuates with the seasons. Masonry sleeps in winter and wakes up in spring. Some stay for 3 years, others for 3 weeks. Their names endure in payroll ledgers stored at the New York Historical Society. Domenico Russo, Master Mason, 42, from Carrara. James Whitfield, Lead Carpenter, 51, trained in Edinburgh. Liam Brennan, 23, General Laborer. Drowns in 1900 when a barge overturns with copper flashing on board. No family is located. Burial is at public expense. The work continues. The system is industrial. Materials arrive on timetables tighter than passenger trains. Lumber from Oregon, old-growth fir for framing, clear vertical grain, no knots bigger than a dime. Copper from Montana smelters, rolled in Philadelphia, shipped in coils weighing 600 pounds apiece. Glass from Belgium, each pane crated in sawdust and insured for replacement cost plus freight. Nothing is improvised. White's office issues revised drawings weekly. Contractors curse the precision, but follow it. By 1901, the shell rises. Limestone walls climb past the second floor line. Scaffolding wraps the structure. A timber exoskeleton braced with hemp rope and iron dogs. Viewed from the water, it looks like a cathedral mid-construction. Visitors reach for comparisons. European fantasies planted in American soil. White rejects the comparison. Not Gothic, he says. Renaissance restraint scaled to the New World. Classical proportions. New ambition. Roofing starts in the spring of 1902. Copper tiles, each one stamped and soldered. Overlapped in courses that will bloom green within 5 years. Slate covers the secondary roofs. Lead flashing seals every joint. The ridge runs 140 feet. 4 chimneys climb another 20 feet above it. Each stack serves multiple hearths. 17 in total, depending on whether you count the servants' grates. Inside, plasterers apply 3 coats: scratch, brown, and finish. Electricians thread wire through chases, white hidden walls. Conduits become invisible once the moldings go on. The lighting plan calls for 200 fixtures. A single plate in the Great Hall controls 12 separately. Craft and technology meet without a seam. By the autumn of 1902, the house is weather-tight. Not finished, but weather-tight. Painters, gilders, tile setters, and cabinet makers will stay another 6 months. But the roof holds, and the windows seal. Stand in the Great Hall, and you hear only wind, not rain. Mackay visits weekly, Katherine less frequently. She is pregnant with their first child. The house waits for life to fill it. Part 3. Night of 1,000 Lights. June 14, 1903. Harbor Hill welcomes its first guests. Not a grand opening, but a dinner. 32 names chosen with care. Architects, patrons, editors from Harper's and Scribner's. Stanford White attends, seated near Katherine. Clarence rises for a toast, brief enough to signal confidence, long enough to acknowledge debts. The dining room glows. Candelabra, 18 arms each, 6 in total, throw light that refracts off silver, crystal, and pale gold damask on the walls. Menus in French list 7 courses. The wines are German, French, and Californian. The meal lasts 3 hours. No one complains. This is a rehearsal. The true performance begins in 1905. By then, the Mackays have a rhythm. Winters in the city, springs and autumns at Harbor Hill, summers in Europe or Newport. Though Harbor increasingly competes with Newport for space on the calendar, the house demands presence. Empty, it ages. Lived in, it declares itself. They host musicians. In April 1906, Enrico Caruso sings in the music room, a private recital for 60 guests who arrive by special train from Pennsylvania Station. The acoustics, laid out by White with advice from engineers at Carnegie Hall, carry Caruso's voice to the back terrace without amplification. Guests stand outside, listening through open French doors, afraid to breathe. Katherine weeps. Clarence writes a check for $5,000 to the Metropolitan Opera's Education Fund. It clears within 48 hours. They host philanthropists. In 1908, a dinner raises money for a tuberculosis sanatorium on Staten Island. 200 donors attend. The grand hall, cleared of furniture, accommodates tables for 20 set in 2 rows. Service requires 40 waiters borrowed from the Plaza Hotel and trained for 3 days on Harbor Hill's floor plan and the sequence of 12 courses. The evening brings in $83,000. Editorials in the New York Times praise the Mackays' generosity, without noting that the dinner itself cost $12,000 to stage. They host scholars, archaeologists, naturalists, and historians. This is Katherine's preference. She establishes a lecture series, autumn evenings, lantern slides, topics ranging from Egyptology to marine biology. Attendance is by invitation. Audiences rarely exceed 50. These nights feel different, quieter. The house settles into its library, its smaller salons, a human scale. Clarence tolerates the series. He does not attend. They host society. This is the engine. Balls in 1909, 1910, and 1912. Guest lists cresting over 300. Orchestras, not quartets, orchestras. Set in the music room, doors open to flood the hall with sound. Flowers shipped from Pennsylvania greenhouses. Roses, orchids, lilies arranged in columns 8 feet high. Champagne by the case. Suppers served past midnight. Dancing until 3 a.m. The ritual runs like machinery. Invitations go out 6 weeks in advance. RSVPs are tracked by Katherine's secretary. Seating charts are revised daily as acceptances arrive. Menus go to Katherine for approval. Wine lists to Clarence. Floral schemes to both. Staff expands from 30 to 60 for these nights. Extra footmen are hired through Manhattan agencies. Temporary cooks reinforce the kitchen's core team of 5. The cost per ball is $15,000 to $20,000, roughly $600,000 today. Not counting wear on carpets, linens, crystal. Not counting the strain. Because beneath the light, something shifts. Photographs from these years show Katherine smiling, but the smile tightens. Clarence grows heavier. Portraits harden his face. They appear together in public. In private, servants notice the quiet. Separate bedrooms, meals at different hours. The house fills with guests and empties at dawn. The couple coexists with it. In 1914, the whispers begin. Not about the house, but about the marriage. Society columns hint, gossip items imply. That summer, Katherine travels to Europe alone and stays 4 months. Clarence remains at Harbor Hill, hosting smaller gatherings, fewer lights. The grand hall, built for joy, learns to echo. Part 4. Shadow in the Golden Room. By 1915, the separation is no longer whispered. It is printed. Town Topics, the scandal sheet that terrifies New York society, runs a blind item transparent enough to identify. A cable magnate's wife prefers Paris to the North Shore. One wonders if undersea wires carry messages home or only silence. Katherine does not respond. She remains in Europe through the winter. Her letters to friends, preserved in the Dewar family papers, speak of museums, salons, and relief work as the war intensifies. She does not mention Clarence. She does not mention Harbor. The omission is louder than a complaint. Clarence fills the house with guests, more dinners, more concerts, larger guest lists, longer weekends. He invites business associates now, not only society. Men from the cable company, the postal telegraph merger, and the wireless experiments beginning to threaten his empire. The tone shifts. Less music, more cigars. Less of Katherine's taste, more of Clarence's will. The house adapts. Staff notice which rooms stay dark, which silver never leaves its drawer. In May 1914, Katherine returns, not to reconcile, but to negotiate. The details stay private, but the framework emerges later in court filings. Separate residences, shared public obligations. Unity on the surface, distance underneath. Katherine keeps her apartments at Harbor Hill. Clarence keeps his schedule. They appear together at events that matter. Charity galas, weddings, funerals. Photographs show them side by side, not touching. Society accepts the performance. Divorce would be a scandal. This is an arrangement. Harbor Hill feels it. Servants describe the change. Meals for two become meals for one, served in different rooms at different hours. The morning room, Katherine's domain, crowded with books and correspondence, closes in her absence. Clarence's study expands. He works later, sleeps less, drinks more. His physician calls weekly. The butler keeps brandy stocked in 3 places. A house built to display harmony now displays its opposite. Children witness it. Clarence Mackay bears 3. Ellen in 1903, John in 1907, Katherine in 1909. They grow up in a palace divided. Ellen later writes of rooms that belong to one parent or the other, and the rooms between where we played. Careful not to choose sides, John leaves for boarding school at 12 and seldom returns on breaks. The younger Katherine develops migraines doctors cannot explain, and staff suspect are a form of escape. This is not a metaphor. This is the record. The cost of Harbor in 1915 is $80,000 a year in maintenance, staff, utilities, and taxes. Roughly $2.4 million today. The mansion must be fed, whether the marriage survives or not. Lawns require mowing. Roofs require repair. Staff require wages. The house does not pause for personal crisis. Clarence pays. Katherine endures. The estate continues. But something essential breaks. The purpose shifts. Harbor was built as a declaration. Love made visible. Fortune made permanent. Family made dynasty. By 1916, it is a stage set, the thing that must be maintained because selling it would admit failure, and failure is unthinkable. So the lights stay on, the staff remains employed, the gardens are tended, and guests still arrive for weekends that look in photographs exactly like the weekends of 1905. Same rooms, same rituals, same curated beauty. Walk through after midnight, when the guests have retired and the servants have withdrawn, and you find something different. Not ruin, not neglect, but something harder to name. A palace that has learned loneliness. Rooms too large for the people who live inside them. Silence no orchestra can permanently cover. The house stands. The marriage does not. And outside, the world is changing in ways that will make both palace and pain feel like relics of a lost age. Part 5. Hidden Hands. Inside, the work continues. Harbor Hill at full stride needs 38 people. Winter trims that to 22. Summer, when the family travels, drops to 15. A skeleton crew preserving what absence cannot erase. These are not abstractions. They are names, wages, and schedules measured in decades. Charles Brennan, head butler, arrives in 1904 and stays 23 years. His realm is the front of the house. the visible machinery of service. He directs the footman, coordinates with the kitchen, and keeps the plate. Silver for 40, crystal for 60, china in 3 patterns depending on the occasion. In 1915, his salary is $1,200 a year plus room, board, and livery, roughly $36,000 today. He supervises 8 people directly. The difference to him is total. Beneath him stands the hierarchy that makes grandeur possible. 2 footmen rotate during events. Their craft is motion without presence. Opening doors, drawing chairs, pouring wine, clearing plates, all performed at the edge of a guest's vision. Training lasts 6 months. The best anticipate needs without seeking a glance. They are furniture that breathes. 5 housemaids work in rotation. 2 for the family rooms, 1 for the guest wings, 2 for the public rooms. They begin at 6 in the morning and finish near 8 at night, with meals taken in the servants' hall, never in the dining room. Tasks include beds, fires, lamps, dusting, laundry sorting, and, when required, despite modern plumbing, chamber pots. Wages run from $18 to $25 a month. The head housemaid earns $35. They share the 3rd floor, 4 beds to a room, 1 wardrobe between 2. The kitchen is another country. Chef Auguste Villard, recruited from Delmonico's in 1906, commands a brigade of 5. 2 sous chefs, a saucier, a pastry specialist, and a kitchen maid who does not cook but scrubs, chops, and hauls. Villard's pay is $2,000, second only to the estate manager. He earns it. Dinners for 30 demand 4 hours of preparation. Balls for 300 require 3 days and borrowed hands. He plans menus, orders provisions, and tastes everything. His standards are French. His temper is notorious. Turnover in his kitchen is high. Outside, the grounds are a living ledger. 12 men in summer, 6 in winter. Head gardener Thomas Crawford keeps 14 acres of lawn, seasonal flower beds, and orchards yielding apples and pears, largely for staff, and greenhouses pushing roses through the year. Grass is cut with push mowers. Motorized options exist, but Mackay prefers the quiet. Edging alone takes 2 men a full day each week. Trees get pruned continuously. Every single window has to frame total ease. That effort is the entire point. The stables have a staff of 4, a head groom, 2 hands, and a carriage driver who switches to chauffeur once the cars come. By 1912, Harbor Hill holds 3 autos. Horses stay for sport, not travel. The groom, Patrick Hayes, has worked with horses for 40 years. He teaches Ellen Mackay to ride side saddle, a skill she hates but learns well. Below the stairs runs a world of boards and bells. The call system links 112 pull cords across the house to a numbered grid in the servants' hall. A bell chimes, a number flips, a worker moves. To the family, it is silence. To the staff, it is the rhythm of every hour. Bells for breakfast, for baths poured, for fires built, for coaches called. No bell is ignored. That is the deal and the cost. Payroll alone hits $42,000 a year in 1915. Add food, uniforms, coal, and upkeep for staff quarters, and the sum climbs to $55,000, roughly $1.6 million today. That is the fee for unseen service. The staff knows what the family often forgets. The house does not run on riches. It runs on wages, hours, and hands that hurt by nightfall. Those hands also hold pride. They sustain something bigger than themselves. Harbor is their job too, even if their names show up on no cornerstone. Part 6. The grammar of Stanford White. White's name is cut into the limestone over the garden door. Stanford White, architect, M.D. CCCC2I. The date marks the end, not the ego. He has no need to announce himself. The building does it for him. Stand at the entry gate, 500 feet from the home, and the logic shows itself. The approach is theater. A gravel road rises in a soft curve through trees White chose. Maples for fall color, oaks for age, space to frame sights without blocking them. The house shows up in parts. First a chimney, then a roof edge, and finally the full front as the drive turns one last time into the court. Not sudden, but sure. Choreography in stone. The front speaks a classical grammar with an American tone. Symmetry leads. The center block stands 3 floors up, flanked by lower wings that step back and down, setting a beat. Tall, short, tall, balancing mass with grace. Limestone is cream when new, turning beige by 1910. Corinthian columns at the main door take sizes from Palladio, enlarged by about 1/3. American clients want European class, only bigger. White complies without being cheap. Windows follow rules older than the nation. On the first floor, they are tall and arched to flood public rooms with light. On the second, they get square and smaller, the bedroom scale. On the third, they simplify more for staff rooms and storage, where decor is waste. The order is clear from the outside. You can read the social rank before crossing the step. It is the terrace that shows White's quiet genius. The house sits on made-up high ground, earth-shaped to build a stage. From the south side, terraces drop in 3 wide steps toward the bay. Each level is marked by rails. Each change is marked by stairs wide enough for 6 people abreast. The drop is formal. At the bottom, a pergola frames the view north over the Sound. Stand there at dusk, and the house behind you glows. Stand at the house looking down, and the water is the estate's edge. White knew that grand homes need great distance, not from neighbors, but from the common world. Inside, the spatial rules go on. The entry hall runs about 30 feet wide and 50 feet long, with roughly 22 feet to the coffered ceiling. Scale that states power without crushing closeness. From here, traffic splits. To the left, the music room and library, Katherine's zone. To the right, the dining room and study, Clarence's realm. At the center, the grand stair rises in a double-height space lit from a skylight 3 floors up. This is the core. Every path lands here or leaves from it. White's skill lies in balance, not newness. He does not invent, he tunes. Room sizes follow tested ratios of height to width and length to height that European builders fixed centuries ago. The golden section repeats, roughly 1.618 to 1, in door heights, window gaps, and the link of floor space to air volume. The ratios feel right without shouting for attention. The eye rests, the body moves with ease. You do not think of design, you just live in it. Sure, the space could not be otherwise. Set Harbor Hill next to its European peers, Tuscan Renaissance villas, Palladio and the Veneto. White takes their words, loggias, rows, ratio systems, and translates. European villas rose from farmlands where balance showed crop logic. Harbor Hill rises from factory wealth where balance shows control. Same words, different sentence. The result is a home that shoots well and lives well. Rooms flow without a mess. Light comes in largely. Views line up on axes, terrace, hall, water. they link. Stand at the center of the main floor, and you see through the house to the sound past it. This is enfilade. The French named it. White honed it for clients who wanted Europe without leaving the States. Design as debate. Space as proof. White built Harbor to say wealth, yes, and taste. Power, yes, and control. The house wins at both.
Part 7. Wires and Fortunes.
But someone had to pay the bill. Clarence Mackay fell into an empire measured in miles of copper wire on the sea floor. His dad, John William Mackay, hit California in 1851 with zero. By 1873, he co-owned the Comstock lode, the biggest silver strike in U.S. history. By 1884, he owned something of more worth, the Commercial Cable Company, laying telegraph lines across the Atlantic when most folks still called the tech a test. The business was simple in idea, huge in action. Notes from New York to London went as electric pulses through wrapped copper, resting roughly 3 miles under the sea. Each cable cost $1 million to make and lay. Each was prone to ship hooks, sea quakes, or slow rot. When they worked, they crushed time. A note that once took 2 weeks by ship now came in roughly 2 minutes. Speed bred a trust.
By 1900, commercial cable moved about 23% of ocean telegraph traffic.
Yearly sales hit $4.2 million, roughly $130 million today, with profit margins near 40% in good years. Clarence took charge when his father died in 1902. He was 28. Harbor was still growing. The timing was not random, but the tech was already being hunted. Radio wireless telegraphy. In 1901, Guglielmo Marconi proved an ocean wireless signal. The same year, Harbor Hill's walls went past the second floor. The signal was raw and unsure, limited to Morse. But it needed no sea cables, no fixed ships, no million-dollar ropes of copper. Only towers, senders, current. Mackay saw the risk and replied with growth. Between 1902 and 1910, commercial cable opened 4 new ocean routes, set up shops in 12 more cities, and poured roughly $2 million into gear updates.
Diversity followed. Local telegraph service, courier runs in Manhattan, and test wireless research to guard against Marconi's wins.
Clarence dealt in person, went to London quarterly, and twice spoke before Congress to save cable trusts against antitrust acts. The work was non-stop, the gains huge. In 1907, Mackay's own income from commercial cable and tied assets hit $800,000, roughly $24 million today. Enough to keep Harbor, the Manhattan townhouse, the Newport cottage, the staffs at all 3, and still save half. But fortunes built on tech die by tech. By 1912, wireless had grown. Marconi's firm launched paid ocean service. In April of that year, the Titanic tragedy sent wireless help calls that brought rescue ships and saved lives. Public mood turned. Wireless was no longer a test. It was vital. Markets agreed. Marconi shares tripled between 1911 and 1913.
Commercial cable stalled.
Mackay changed again. In 1914, he merged commercial cable with postal telegraph, forming the second biggest telegraph firm in America after Western Union. The merger brought scale perks, removed a foe, and made short-term gain. It also signaled a pullback. Mergers are what firms do when growth ends. War messed up everything. In 1917, the U.S. government seized control of global cable traffic for state safety. Pay was sworn, paid slowly, and figured below market rates. Mackay's sales fell by roughly 30% in a single year. Costs did not drop. Upkeep, payroll, and interest on loans used to fund the postal deal went on regardless. By 1918, Mackay's own income had slid to $400,000. Still big, still enough, but half of what it had been 6 years back, and the path was clear. The tech that made him rich was being pushed out by a tech he did not own. Harbor noticed.
Staff cuts began softly. A gardener not replaced when old. Guest suites opened less often. Balls became yearly instead of seasonal. The wine cellar quit adding years. Whispers, not shouts. Servants saw it. Vendors saw it. Society not yet. The house still shone. The lawns stayed perfect. The front showed no cracks. But the fortune below was thinning, and the weight above was not. Part 8. War Changes the Music. April 6, 1917. America declares war on Germany. By April 20th, Harbor Hill declares itself, too. The Grand Hall that hosted 300 dancers last fall now seats the North Shore Women's War Relief Committee. 70 women meet at tables once set for wine and sweets. They roll bandages. Katherine Mackay leads. Her planning skills, asleep in social tasks, are suddenly vital. She sets goals. 500 bandages per meet, each rolled to Red Cross rules and checked before boxing. The women work in shifts. Some bring maids. The maids work beside them. This is not a show. This is output. By summer, the change goes deep. The music room turns into HQ for Liberty Bond drives. Local banks send agents. Mackay pledges $50,000 himself and backs another $100,000 in bonds sold to staff of commercial cable and postal telegraph. His name is in papers not for parties, but for duty. Society pages give way to civic news. The dining room still hosts funding meals, but the mood is grave. Menus shrink to 4 courses instead of 7. American wines take over French ones. Funds aid the Red Cross, the YMCA, and camp libraries for troops training at Camp Upton, 30 miles east. Guests come in evening wear but leave jewels at home. Waste is suspect now. Control is a virtue. In October 1917, Katherine offers Harbor Hill for hospital use if needed. The bid is noted, filed, not used right away. Long Island clinics have room, but the act counts. The estate that once meant private riches now offers itself for public good. The staff adapts. Charles Brennan, the butler, starts a war savings plan. Workers pledge 5% of pay to Liberty Bonds. Technically free choice, practically total. Duty and peer force are hard to split. By war's end, Harbor Hill staff will have bought $4,000 in bonds, roughly $120,000 today. Brennan keeps the books. He will see every cent paid back. Clarence's gift is less seen, more heavy. Commercial cable gives line space for Army comms. Ocean lines carry coded notes placed ahead of paid traffic. Sales drop. Mackay does not gripe in public. Privately, his clerks count the loss. $80,000 in missed income by November 1918. He does not ask for payback. The war also brings new types of guests. In spring 1918, Harbor Hill hosts a weekend for officers from Camp Upton. Majors, colonels, a general. The goal is spirit and funding. The officers walk the grounds, eat in the formal room, and hear a group play Brahms and Dvorak. Nothing German. Photos show uniforms on the terrace with the sound behind them. Looks careful. They are being judged as much as honored. Society is watching to see if the rich will share or just wave.
Mackay passes the test. He writes another check, $25,000 to the Camp Upton Welfare Fund. But something has moved that will not move back. Harbor opened as a statement of private win. It staged private joys for private crowds. War forced it open. Boards, causes, strangers walking halls built for close friends. The house did its duty, and once opened, the door does not fully shut. After the truce in November 1918, life does not go back to 1914. Parties start up smaller. Guest lists shrink. The mood never regains its pre-war light. People have seen too much, spent too much, lost too much. They have also seen inside estates like Harbor Hill, not as guests, but as citizens claiming temporary use. The house stays grand. Greatness alone no longer proves itself. Clarence and Katherine feel it without naming it. They keep hosting. The habits stick. The center has shifted. And 20 miles west in a rented cottage, a young writer watches the shore and sees something that will outlive every party. Part 9. Myth and Map. His name is F. Scott Fitzgerald. The year is 1922. He rents a house in Great Neck, modest by Gold Coast rules, close enough to see the mansions and hear weekend music float across the water. He is 26. His first novel, This Side of Paradise, made him known 2 years prior. His second, The Beautiful and Damned, sold well but got mixed reviews. He needs a third book. He needs it to be distinct, so he watches. Fitzgerald goes to parties along the shore. Not at Harbor Hill, he lacks the rank, but at estates near enough in soul. Columned fronts, terrace lawns, cars and yachts dropping guests, bands until dawn, champagne in amounts that make prohibition into a far-off joke. He studies the actors, men who made fortunes in war deals, luck, real estate, women who wed titles, money, or both. Everyone acts wealth, joy, the faith that 1922 will last forever. He knows the act, because he is acting too. Fitzgerald's pay in 1923 is $28,000, roughly $500,000 today. Good for a writer, weak for this shore. His asset is literary fame, not bloodline. He stands inside the world, but not of it. The perfect angle for viewing. In the fall of 1923, he starts draft. Working title: Trimalchio in West Egg. Setting: 2 made-up points, East Egg and West Egg, mapped from Great Neck and Sands Point, where Harbor Hill stands. Plot: an odd millionaire stages wild parties in a mansion drawn to wow a woman who lives across the water. She is wed, out of reach, the symbol of what he wants but cannot hold. The similarities to Harbor Hill are not a perfect mirror image. Gatsby's fictional manor is described as Georgian colonial, whereas Harbor Hill was distinctly Renaissance in style. The fictional parties are wilder and less disciplined than the real ones. However, the geography is exact. Gatsby stands on the western peninsula, gazing east across the bay toward the old money, the established lineages and secure social standing. Harbor Hill's actual view was the reverse, looking back toward the city. Fitzgerald finishes his manuscript in October 1924 and spends the winter revising. The title eventually becomes The Great Gatsby. It is published on April 10, 1925. The initial sales are a letdown. Roughly 20,000 copies move in the first year. Respectable, perhaps, but far from spectacular. Critics are divided.
Some laud the prose, while others dismiss the plot as thin and the characters as unappealing. Fitzgerald earns less than $2,000 in royalties. His editor at Scribner's sends letters of comfort, insisting the book will eventually find its readership. He is more correct than he realizes. Yet in 1925, Harbor Hill takes no notice. The Mackays do not read Gatsby. Their household staff does not whisper about it. The novel sells modestly, drops off the bestseller lists, and drifts into the vast, seasonal river of American fiction. It only returns later. It is reissued for soldiers fighting in the Second World War, adopted by university curriculums in the 1950s, and canonized by the 1960s. By 1970, The Great Gatsby sells more copies annually than it did in its entire first decade. The Gold Coast of the book, shimmering, doomed, and forever frozen in the summer of 1922, becomes more tangible to readers than the actual historical shoreline. Tourists flock to Long Island searching for Gatsby's mansion. They discover estates. Some are preserved, but many have been erased. They ask about the parties, the green light at the end of the dock, and the place where Gatsby reached out across the water toward a dream he couldn't quite define. Tour guides point to probable inspirations. Harbor Hill is always cited. The location matches. The sheer scale matches. Most of all, the ambition made visible in limestone matches. But Gatsby's house, much like the character himself, is a composite. A dozen different estates contributed details, and Fitzgerald invented the rest. What truly matters is this. The novel gave permanence to something temporary. It transformed wealth into mythology, excess into an elegy, and a dated summer season into something universal. Harbor Hill threw real celebrations for real guests who are now largely forgotten. Gatsby threw fictional parties for fictional guests who never die. Part 10. Crash, Taxes, and Time. Harbor Hill's guests were mortal. The fortune that supported them was equally fragile. The calendar turned to October 29, 1929. Black Tuesday. The stock market collapsed. 16 million shares changed hands in a single chaotic day. Vast wealth vanished between the opening and closing bells. Clarence Mackay was not completely wiped out, as his wealth wasn't centered entirely on equities, but he was severely wounded. Postal telegraph, trading at $42 in September, plummeted to $18 by November. It never recovered. The immediate effect on the house was muted. There were no mass firings, and no wings of the house were shut down overnight. Harbor Hill in 1930 looked much like Harbor Hill in 1928. But beneath the surface, the math had changed. Annual maintenance in 1930 stood at $95,000, roughly $1.7 million today. Investment income was down about 30% from 1928 and continuing to fall. Clarence began to prune expenses with caution. The wine cellar stopped acquiring new stock. Weekend parties became thinner. The orchestra hired for the Christmas ball shrank from 22 pieces to 14. These were adjustments, not a surrender. But the depression deepened. By 1932, postal telegraph was running at a loss. Businesses slashed their communication budgets and revenue collapsed. Western Union, the larger rival, survived on sheer scale. Postal survived only on Mackay's willingness to subsidize it. Between 1930 and 1935, he poured $1.2 million of his personal capital into the company, roughly $27 million today, to save jobs, maintain service, and protect the family name on the letterhead. Harbor Hill paid the price.
Staff cuts moved from subtle hints to strict policy. The gardening crew dropped from 12 men to 7. 3 housemaids were let go. The chauffeur remained, but 2 stable hands did not. Charles Brennan, the loyal butler, accepted a 10% pay cut to avoid termination. He stayed. Others left. By 1935, the permanent staff numbered just 22, about half the pre-Depression roster. Taxes accelerated the decline. Property taxes in 1925 were $12,000 a year. In 1935, they hit $28,000. The assessment more than doubled, despite collapsing property values everywhere else. The reason? Harbor Hill's improvements were deemed permanent.
The mansion, the stables, the greenhouses, the terracing. These were fixed assets the county could measure and tax. Land values might fall, but buildings remain. The financial burden hardened. Clarence challenged the tax assessment 3 times. He lost twice and won a partial reduction once. The county needed revenue, and estates like Harbor Hill were dependable targets. Sympathy was scarce. By 1936, Clarence was 62. His health was slipping. His diabetes was poorly controlled, and cardiac strain was worsened by relentless stress. His physician prescribed rest, travel, and less responsibility. Clarence ignored the advice. Postal telegraph needed him daily. Merger talks with Western Union would begin, stall, resume, and stall again. The company was bleeding. He couldn't stop it, he could only slow it down. Katherine was at Harbor Hill only intermittently. The fractured marriage had calcified into a legal formality. Public appearances together were rare. When they did occur, photographs showed 2 people who looked far older than their years. Katherine was 59 in 1936, but looked 70. Clarence looked worse. The house began to show a restraint that read as wear. It wasn't neglect. Mackay would not allow that. But it was deferral. Painting due for a refresh was postponed. Carpets due for replacement were simply turned around. In 1937, the roof developed leaks. Repairs happened, but slowly, room by room, as cash permitted. The ballroom ceiling developed stains. Visitors pretended not to notice. Prospective buyers appeared. Between 1936 and 1940, 4 serious inquiries arrived. Developers wanted the land. Institutions wanted the building. All 4 offers shared a pattern. Valuations at a fraction of the construction cost. One bid in 1938 offered $350,000 for the entire estate. Mackay had spent $2 million on the house alone. He refused. But refusal is not a strategy. It is pride. By 1940, the question was no longer if Harbor Hill would be sold, but whether it would go intact or be sold in pieces. Clarence delayed the answer. Death arrived first. Part 11. After Silence. Clarence Mackay died on November 12, 1938, at the age of 64. The dates are important because rumors often tangle them. His death occurred before America's entry into the war, and his second marriage to Anna Case, an opera singer 26 years his junior, had happened back in 1931. Society whispered about the union. The marriage was brief, often strained, and by the late 1930s, it functioned mostly on separate tracks. Anna favored Manhattan, while Clarence remained on Long Island, increasingly isolated and unwell. Katherine, his first wife, had already secured her settlement. The children, Ellen, John, and Katherine, received shares but not control. Ellen, who had married Irving Berlin in 1926 against her father's wishes, was disinherited and later partially restored to the will. The result was complex, litigated, and slow. After Clarence's death, the estate passed into the hands of executors. Then came Pearl Harbor in December 1941. America mobilized. The trustees of the estate offered what they could to the war effort: postal telegraph capacity and bond purchases. But the house itself stood silent. It was essentially empty now. The staff had dwindled to a caretaker and 2 groundsmen. Whole wings were closed off. The ballroom, unused since 1939, was shuttered to save heat. The pipes were drained, but in 1940, a freeze caused flooding in the north wing. Repairs waited on court approvals.
In 1941, vandals broke windows. Local teenagers wandered through the abandoned mansion. It wasn't legally abandoned, merely empty. By 1942, the family decided to sell. But wartime was the wrong market. Buyers were scarce. Developers couldn't secure building materials. The estate listed at $400,000. No offers came. The price fell to $300,000. One inquiry, but no contract. By 1945, the asking price was $250,000 for a property that once cost more than $3 million to build and furnish. In 1947, a buyer finally appeared. For the land, not the house. A developer proposed Harbor Hill Estates, roughly 60 residential lots carved from the 216 acres. The mansion was an obstacle, not an asset. Demolition was baked into the bid. The family accepted $190,000, roughly $2.7 million today. The deal closed in August. Demolition began in October 1947. It was 6 months of methodical erasure. Salvage crews went in first. Marble mantels, crystal chandeliers, mahogany paneling, and the grand stair were sold to dealers and other homeowners seeking instant grandeur. The shell followed under explosives and wrecking balls. Limestone was crushed for fill. The copper roof was stripped for scrap. By April 1948, the site was bare. 45 years after completion, Harbor Hill was gone. Not slowly, not by neglect, but deliberately and efficiently. Photographs remain. Floor plans sit in archives. A few fragments, gates, garden pieces, odd survivors, live in museums. But the house itself, the 3-dimensional fact that Stanford White drew and hundreds of men built, no longer exists. What remains? The land is subdivided. 60 suburban houses sit where one palace once stood. Families living there do not know their backyards once held orchestras. And the myth? Gatsby's mansion is never demolished. It is forever hosting a party for guests who do not age. Part 12. Legacy and Hope. There is a sharp irony in how this played out. Fiction preserved what fortune could not. Harbor Hill's demolition was not unique. Between 1940 and 1960, over 200 Gold Coast estates were destroyed. The reasons varied: taxes, maintenance costs, changing social values, and pressure for suburban development. But the pattern was identical. Families sold, developers purchased, and bulldozers arrived. Within months, mansions that took years to build became nothing but memories. But something shifted. In 1956, the National Trust for Historic Preservation was formed, driven partly by outrage over these losses. In 1966, Congress passed the National Historic Preservation Act, establishing legal frameworks to identify and protect significant structures. States followed suit. New York created landmark designation processes. Local historical societies organized, documented, and fought back. Some estates survived. Oheka Castle, built in 1919, just 8 miles from the Harbor Hill site, was saved in 1984, restored, and now operates as a hotel and event space. Old Westbury Gardens, built in 1906 and preserved by the Phipps family, opened to the public in 1959 and is visited by 50,000 people annually. Sands Point Preserve, the former Guggenheim estate, was saved from development in 1971 and is now a nature center and historic site. These victories share common elements: community advocacy, financial creativity, and adaptive reuse. Museums, schools, event venues, and nature preserves became ways to make historic houses financially sustainable in a world that cannot afford staffs of 38. The loss of Harbor Hill taught preservationists what silence costs. Today, organizations like the Society for the Preservation of Long Island Antiquities, Preserve America, and local historical societies maintain databases, offer technical assistance, and mobilize public support when estates face threats of demolition. Success is not guaranteed, but the fight happens now, publicly and loudly. You are part of this. Every time you visit a historic house museum, you justify its preservation budget. Every time you share a story like this, you build the cultural case for saving what remains. When a local estate faces development, your letter to the town board, your attendance at the hearing, and your voice, these things matter. Harbor Hill cannot be rebuilt, but dozens of estates like it still stand. They are still vulnerable, still waiting for communities to decide if their value outweighs their inconvenience. The workers who built Harbor Hill are gone. The family that commissioned it is gone. The architect, the guests, the orchestras, all gone. What endures? The record, the photographs, the measured drawings, the stories we tell, and the choice we make today about the houses still standing. Gatsby is fiction. The losses are real. The next rescue is ours.